Hey everybody, it is election day, November 3rd. I've already voted. I'm very nervous, and so I'm dealing with it by going out on the water, doing some kayaking. And since I hadn't recorded the second part of my Q&A, I thought I'd take you guys with me. So first YouTube video on the road, let's see if it works. All right, so it's pretty windy, so we'll see how well the audio turns out here. But step one, inflate the kayak. So cue time lapse. All right. We're off. All right. Ooh. This might prove difficult. All right, there we go. Hey everybody. I've paddled to the middle of my little lake canal. I'm actually on Silver Lake, Rochester, Minnesota. It's gorgeous. So let's pour some coffee and let's answer some questions about myself. Yeah, hopefully you can hear me. I know it's pretty windy. If not, if you can't hear me, well, who knows? I'll try to speak up. I should probably speak up a little more. I'm a little embarrassed to be in the middle of this lake just talking to myself, but it's for you. It's for you guys. So Ivan asks, did you read Anthem by Neil Stephenson? No, I haven't. He asked if I'd be willing to. I'll look into it. I actually haven't heard of that. I've never read Neil Stephenson and I'd like to, so maybe. What is, okay, this is a good question. Pete Wagger asks, what is your favorite fictional language and why? Ooh. This is kind of basic, so sorry about being a basic fantasy reader, but Elvish in The Lord of the Rings I think is so cool because of its Welsh influence. Welsh is such a cool language that usually doesn't get a lot of pull, and now it does. And so thank you, I guess, J.R.R. Tolkien, so Elvish. I also did recently finish Leviathan Wakes, and I mentioned this on my review. I love the Belter language, how it's sort of a bastardization of a ton of different like contemporary languages we have out here on Earth, like Chinese, English, what else did I have? German, French. I think that was really cool and sort of a honest portrayal of how like languages, what's the word I'm looking for? How languages evolve over time. I'm a little nervous that I'm going to be a silhouette because the sun's behind me, so sorry. Maybe I should try to turn around. Hold on. I'm going to try to turn around without spilling coffee. This is a bad idea, or without tipping you guys over. All right. Ooh, nope, let's go the other way. Okay. Yeah, this is fine. The other question Pete asked, I think, is, there, you guys can probably see me a lot better now. The other question he asked is, what's my favorite non-sci-fi or fantasy book? Oh, come on. Definitely by a country mile is gonna be The People's History of the United States. I've mentioned this before, but I just think it's an amazing work by Howard Zinn, telling the story of history from the perspective of oppressed people in the U.S.'s history rather than by the victors. I think it's phenomenal. Everyone should read it, especially if you're from the United States or live here currently. I think it's really important to get the story of oppressed peoples, both where you live. I'm failing at talking and moving the kayak at the same time. There we go. All right. I think it's always important to listen to oppressed people and get to know them, because as the non-oppressed people, if you're not doing that, then no one will, and nothing will change. Library of Alexandria. Hey, Alan. What is your favorite historical period to study, read about, if any? I love history in all of its facets. I kind of go in spurts. Obviously, when I was doing my graduate study, I was really interested in ancient history, the Medes, Persians, the Davidic dynasty in Israel, going all the way to Alexander and his conquests, and then into the Roman period. Loved all of that. And then in my graduate, so that was undergraduate, I was really into that. My graduate degrees, I really got into Reformation era history in the Middle Ages. And then as I graduated from that, I guess I've been going pretty chronologically. I never really thought about that. I really got into the age of industrialization and revolution, especially the French Revolution, because obviously I knew a lot about the American Revolution growing up here in the United States and our education system. And then just this past year, I started really getting into turn of the century stuff and how our modern world was shaped in the latter part of the 20th century, especially Jill Lepore's book, These Truths, I think does a great job in her latter chapters there. So I'd highly recommend that book as well. Bookish Mom, Jesse, asks, if you could spend a day with one fictional character, who would it be and why? Oh, I answered this already, didn't I, with Saphira? I'm actually pretty proud of that. Joanna, who always has great comments on the videos, asks if you could have Steven Erikson on your channel, which I really hope. That he's now shared 2 of my videos, so hopefully we'll get that. He says, Joanna asks, what book-related question would you ask him, or what topic would you want him to discuss? Ideally something not asked in previous interviews. I'm glad you asked this, because this is something I'm really interested in. I don't know anything about his religious system and thoughts and upbringing. As someone who grew up in a very religious, evangelical family and sort of have been deconstructing and find out what I believe about God in my adulthood and sort of, again, deconstructing what I've been taught and what I need to keep and what I need to get, I need to reform. His themes really hit home, especially themes of redemption and Toll the Hounds and just divinity and godhood and how we as humans live in light of those ideas. So profound and interesting, his observations on those. So I'm curious if he grew up in a religious household, what he believes, if he's willing to talk about that. Obviously a very personal subject, so I'd have to ask him before the interview if he'd like to, but I'd really like to ask him about that, and particularly some stuff in Toll the Hounds. I don't want to get too spoilery, so check out my spoiler review if you want to see more about my thoughts there. Love Story asks, if you could have a drink with any 3 writers, dead or alive, who would you pick? If you could have a drink with any 3 characters, who would they be? Oh, this is very interesting. My legs are kind of falling asleep, so I'm going to switch positions here. Give me a second. Stay. Not so bad. 3 people, fictional. Well, let's go with authors first. I mean, I think just because I love Malazan so much, I would probably have to pick Steven Erikson as one of them. But then after that, I'd be really interested. If you've ever read Martin Luther, he was quite a fiery guy. And even though I'm not sure what I think religiously, I'd love to ask him some religious questions. He was a reformer in the early 16th century and really one of the most influential people in the history of Europe. So definitely want to talk with him, ask him some questions, and then I don't know. That's a really interesting. I feel like I should ask people who are dead, because people who are alive, you have like a question to talk to them. But I'm just gonna say he wrote a play, but I think that's fine. Lin-Manuel Miranda seems like the nicest guy in the world. I'd love to have dinner with him and hang out. Fictional characters is harder, because a lot of things that make characters interesting are also things that would make me not want to hang out with them. I don't know. I'm going to come back to that, maybe in the back of my head, think about it. See what other questions. Oh no, my phone locked, which is always dangerous when you're on the water. Alright, here we go. How do you take your cough rate? That is a great question. That's by Abby. I like my coffee black, and I know that's kind of boring, so I'll be more specific. I like lighter roasts, and if I had my choice, I would do a single origin from the African region. Really like Ethiopia's. They're very dark and earthy, and that's kind of my thing.
But generally African coffee is my favorite. She also has my favorite alcoholic drinks. Love cocktails. Negroni right now is probably my favorite, which is a gin-based drink with some Campari and a little bitters, as well as a little orange. It's delicious. Negronis, highly recommend. It's really getting windy now, so I'm assuming you guys can't hear anything I'm saying. So I'm going to be really up close and personal, probably way too much so. Favorite and least favorite character in Malazan? I think my favorite is Fiddler. I just think he's so interesting, especially because he's a main character. If you don't want to know anything about Malazan, maybe move along. But I love that, like, he's a main character, but he doesn't really, like, affect the story at all. He's just there when things happen. I just think that's super interesting. I also like Yano's parent because, for obvious reasons, like I'm drawn to his sort of existential and epistemological questions that he's always having. Also, I have stomach issues, so again, me and Perrin there, side by side. Least favorite, probably Nemander, just because, like, he's a great character and where he ends up is very interesting, but it's just kind of a slog. Oh no, obvious Clip. I mean, that's an obvious. Clip is just an asshole and always will be an asshole and is an asshole. He's the worst. This is interesting. Bearded Bookworm asks, do you have a favorite comedian? If so, who? I think I would have to say favorite comedian would be John Mulaney. I just love how he tells stories so interestingly, and yet also has some really, as great comedians always do, interesting observations about the world and some critiques of culture. Like John Mulaney, so good. Big fan of him. Kai, asks, he says, congratulations, thank you, and congratulations to you guys. I mean, you did this. I just kind of talked into a microphone. I'm about to run into some bushes, so I'm going to have to change pretty soon. But I'll answer this first. How did you come across Malazan? Oh, so my friend Jim Hamilton. Maybe I shouldn't say his full name. I don't think that's a big deal. Jim is in my D&D group and just mentioned it one day, and I was like, that's awesome. And then my friend DJ also was like, oh yeah, I introduced it to Jim and took credit for it because that's how DJ rolls. But he was right. It's great. It took me a long time, like years after that, to actually pick it up and love it like I do, but been loving it. What was my favorite book growing up? Well, you could probably guess this from my answer, fictional characters. I loved Aragon. Like, I read Lord of the Rings, and that was my favorite, but Aragon I read several times, and I had a huge, huge crush when I was like 13 on Arya. And and the fact that it was written by started with someone who was there 15, like, that brought me to start writing my worlds as a, like, middle schooler. Just as a side for fun, I have written like 8 different worlds. I started writing, and I would like write maps and like these whole ideas and magic systems, blah 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 blah, and then I'd get like a chapter into actual writing and then quit and start something else. So that was always my jive. All right, I'm getting stuck in the river, so I'm gonna have to go fix this. All right, we might have gotten this lens a little wet there. My bad. We're going under a bridge, which will be fun. So we're back to this position because I want to drink some more coffee. Let's see here. What else you guys got for me? What do you want to know about me? Eric asks an interesting question I do get a lot, and there's this feeling going on in the Malazan community that I don't like. He asks, after reading Malazan, do you find you are reading other books differently, or perhaps having a view perspective on books you have read? So I don't mean that question in particular. I think actually that's a good question, Eric, but it touches on something that happens a lot in the Malazan community, where people say that like Malazan ruins other books for them, like, oh, it's so good, like I can't go back and read, Dune or whatever. I think that's crazy. You should be able to, something shouldn't be so good that you can't enjoy other things. We're going under a bridge, which probably is going to mess with my light, but I think that's ridiculous. This question, though, by Eric is really well put. It does
I think show me how strong a fantasy world can act as a example for good things in our world, if that makes sense. So I think it's a positive example of how fantasy can be used well. Please describe your most Blanche moment to date, asks Charmeezy, which I think is Charmaine. So over on the Shelf Space Discord, I mentioned that we were talking about Golden Girls, and I mentioned that I'm definitely a Blanche. And so the most Blanche thing I've ever done might have been on the first Q&A where I went through a male hair tutorial, but I'll give you another story just in case. In college, I dated this one girl. She was very nice, but we ended up not really breaking up because we were just dating for a couple of times. But then the next week after we had finished our dating experience, I started going on long walks / like mini dates with her roommate. And then like a week into that, I had to sit down with like a third party friend who wasn't a roommate, but like lived next to them in the dorms. She gave me a very stern talking to that I was ruining the camaraderie of the dorm girls. So that's probably my most Blanche moment. Maybe, who knows, there's probably other things. I think that's about it. So maybe I'll end with the Blanche story, and I think I told you everything else. Yep, I think that's it. Again, thank you guys so much for getting me to 1K and coming out on this fun day trip, getting away from the election craziness. Yeah, it's a beautiful day. Maybe I'll end with some shots of Silver Lake a little more. Other than that, first in, last out.